All right, hey everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Great Debate. We are back for season 2. We are back in the building. And as I say, we're back, but in a different building. We are at the front room in Croydon, which is an amazing music and art space. Deep in the heart of South London. They're doing a fantastic job. And I want you to go online and check them out for the work that they do and see if you can't get in touch with them and use the place yourself. Okay, so I'm joined by my trusty panel of guests, musicians, artists, extraordinaires from the industry. Please introduce yourself.
Hello guys, my name is Matty Brown.
My name is Smooth, aka The Bishop.
Oh my gosh.
Look at your head.
My name's Alicia Hughes.
I'm Joseph Ross, representing the Midlands.
Oh, right.
Him.
Okay, yes.
We also have Ryan on Zoom. Introduce yourself. I just did.
Hey guys, Ryan J. Bruce. I'm from London, but I live in Atlanta, so glad to be here.
Amazing. Okay, so I am joined by, sorry, I'll start again. On this season, as you know, every episode, we are bringing in guests to talk with us as well as the panel to just help us get deeper into the issues and get to the crux of what we're talking about and give us more insight from their perspective. So we have 3 guests today. One of them is sitting right next to me. Introduce yourself.
Hey guys, my name is JC May. Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime. JC is a phenomenal singer and worship leader artist. So we are happy to have you here, definitely. Okay, our next guest is the pastor, the senior pastor of Tab Church, who also plays host to Tab Worship, one of the hottest outfits in the land. He's been a guest host and speaker on TBN. Please welcome Pastor Mike White.
My privilege to be here. Thank you.
And our last, but definitely not least, guest is the senior pastor of Ruach City Church. He's the founder of the Inspirational Choir, as well as the host of an amazing TV show called People Get Ready. From back in the day, I'm sure we all know it. Please welcome Bishop John Francis.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here on the show.
Anytime. Okay, so today we are going to be discussing a very important topic, something that is really close to my heart and the panel's heart. Us guys talk a lot and we rap about different things in the UK gospel music industry. And one of the things we felt passionate about was really kind of finding out and wanting to talk to some experienced people about what role does the church have to play in building the UK gospel music industry? Does it even see itself as having a role? Is it doing us all a favor by helping and supporting, or should it be stepping up to the plate and making things happen? So I want to first come to, let me go to Bishop straight away. Bishop, obviously you're a musician, singer, choir director, all the rest of it, and you're a musician, and you've made that transition from musician into being a pastor. Did being a musician hold as much importance to you when you became a pastor, or did it become less important as you became a pastor?
Good question. When I became a pastor, and because I was involved in music, I had a challenge with people taking me seriously. The problem I had was they kept seeing me as an artist and a musician. So when starting Ruach City Church, the word on the street was they're not going there for church, they're just going there for the music. And you got to understand it. The church world was different to how it is now. Mm-hmm. So it was very difficult, but I couldn't help it. I'm a musician. Singing was my thing. And whilst I played down, I must admit, the music side of our church in the early part, because I wanted everyone to understand I was not just doing a choir thing now, I was doing ministry on a whole. And to be honest, it was very, very difficult. In fact, the UK really didn't embrace me. It was America that embraced the preaching side of me, the ministry. Then later on, the UK people kind of said, oh yeah, we know him. But you got to understand there was a lot of changes that was happening in the UK. with the church world.
Great answer. Thank you for that. And do you think then that like, does music become less important when you're a pastor, or did you have to just respond to basically what you said, like the state of play, as because people weren't accepting you? So did you have to make a conscious decision to not be this kind of artist, singer, choir leader type person, and move away from that and become, right, people need to see me as pastor now?
Well, you got to understand, worship is important. It's a part of a church. If you don't have no worship, really, I mean, that's why they call it the place of worship. So when you have that whole thing going on, it's important. But what I had to do was play that part down a little bit, not saying that it didn't happen, because it very much did happen. I was drawing musicians, singers as well when I started. But the thing was, I had to focus on more of the preaching of the word, the teaching of the word at that particular time. But I'm a musician, and so my ears will always be open. The way I operate probably was different. In fact, I was different from a lot of churches because music was my thing. And so it was difficult. It really was difficult. And you got to understand, there was a lot of different dynamics then. And, I left my father's church, started a church. That's something you don't do. And there was transition going on with how the churches were from your traditional churches, your sort of, when I'm talking about traditional in terms of no jewelry, no makeup, or that kind of classical type church. There was so many, when you ask me that question, there's so many different things that run through my mind to try to answer that question. But as a musician, that was my thing. And I pushed it naturally. It wasn't something I needed to overdo because it was something that naturally was happening. Good singers, good musicians, all the top ones in the church. And so it stood out.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Thanks a lot, Bishop. I'm glad for that answer because it's actually making a backdrop to stuff that we're going to talk about in a minute. But I want to come to you, Joseph, real quick. What's your opinion as somebody who is well versed in the church, has been in the church, also got a lot of experience outside of the church as a musician, as a music director, as a creative? What's your opinion on whether does the church play enough of a role? Should it be playing more of a role in building an industry by way of supporting artists, or like either financially or whatever?
Yeah, I believe that the church plays a massive, or should play a massive role. And I think with myself and a few of the other guys on the panel, we've kind of had to make our name outside of the church, going into like the secular side of work. And a lot of that is because the church hasn't really supported or appreciated what they've had. And it's sad to say you get treated better. I mean, it's improved now, but I think at a time, like especially when I first started doing like full-time music, the church wasn't really that interested. And I think sometimes you have to go out to bring a bit of excellence back inside the church, because I think sometimes the music ministry wasn't really deemed as important. And then you'd come back to church with a lot of things that you've learned, no different to somebody going away and studying at uni and coming back and you're bringing some kind of excellence to the house. And some of the things we would learn and try and bring back excellence to church, it was frowned on. Wow. If we wanted, you go out on an arena tour. I'm not saying church has that kind of budget, but to a point you can still make certain things work to make a worship experience different. You can put on a Fred Hammond thing on, or whatever, or a Kurt thing, and the whole production is done a certain way. But I think I would find when you come back to church, it was frowned on, especially in the Pentecostal church. I've got to be honest, it really wasn't something that they really found important. And I think a trick has been missed. I think if they'd have been involved with it from years ago, they could have established their own in-house record labels. They could have had their own studios. We could have been churning out records, and I think they caught onto it too late. So the church has got music ministry is massive, and it's as important as preaching. It's as important. I understand they all have their places, but you can't it's a house of worship.
I hear you.
And to me, I just think church really missed the trick.
Okay, I love that. I'm going to come to you in a second, Pastor Mike. But, JC, you have a very interesting story. And I think it's going to give us a lot of context for what we're talking about. In as fast a way as you can, give us a quick overview of your story.
So I don't speak for everybody. I kind of speak for myself and my own experience. But one thing that I kind of have appreciated about the leadership that I've been under and the churches that I've been to is that they have given me a helping hand. And so back in 2016, I remember having a conversation with my leaders, and they felt that I was using the stage to promote my name. And so I was just like, ooh, okay, bye. And so I moved out, and I came under leadership in Southeast London. And I remember being there, and not only just being there, but it was kind of like under their leadership that I grew as a worship leader, that I grew not just as a worship leader, but somebody who is spiritual, somebody who loves God, somebody who understands that it's not just leading a song, but I'm also leading the people to help aid the leader, whoever was preaching. And I remember being put on all of their events. So they would put me on their events. They would put me on, whether it was a wedding, whether it was a conference. I was like their main praise and worship leader at the time. And when I wanted to host my worship service, they gave me the building for free. It wasn't even though I was happy to pay, I was happy to be like, yeah, you know, how much would it be? But the pastor was just like, no, JC, no. Take this, do what you need to do, you're one of ours, and so have the building. And so I've been fortunate to have been under great leadership who understand the role that not only music plays, but also understand the gravity of being a worship leader or being an artist and needing that up-and-coming support to be able to propel yourself into your next level. So yeah, that's me. But I love the fact that I've been able to see that side of leadership. So it's been such a blessing and an honor for me to be able to see that. But then I also obviously see the flip side of it as well. So yeah, so.
Cool. So essentially, JC, you went from a situation where you were pouring out your heart on the stage as a worship leader and were basically accused, or it was seen that you were using the stage to promote your own name over God's, into a situation whereby you're being heavily supported by the people in leadership. I think that is literally the yin and the yang, the two opposite sides of the coin of how 100%. It can go. So Pastor Mike, hearing all what we've spoken about already, I personally see you as one of the most progressive, running forward pastors around. And I can say that just from the optics, let alone knowing a bit about your history and your church and stuff. But what I want to ask you is that a conscious decision for you to be that way, or do you just have a dope worship team and dope MD, so you might as well do something with it? You see what I mean? Quiet over there, Smooth.
Good job.
Well, first of all, thank you for reaching out to the office for an invitation to come and partake in this discussion, which I received with great alacrity. It's an important topic. I'm passionate about music. I'm passionate about God, of course. We're Christians here. In response to your question, it's been an intentional decision to invest and to focus on the development of the worship ministry, number one, and the music ministry in particular. Notice I differentiated worship from music. So both of those things are heavily invested in terms of our focus, our vision. Marrying that answer with the initial overture, your first question about the church's responsibility, I think for us as a church community at the Tab, in Southeast London. I'm glad you came to Southeast London, Jason. Not to the tab, but you came to Southeast London. You almost got it right. I'm only joking. I'm messing around. You're in a great church. I'm messing around. But of course, I think the church's responsibility is, number one, not to develop a gospel industry.
Wow.
I'm antithetical towards that. I don't think that's the church's responsibility. I think it's something the church should be involved in, but responsibility is a very interesting word, or requirement, or anything else that puts the onus on the church. As the church, our responsibility is to help make disciples. Our responsibility is to help disciples discover their gifting, develop their gifting, and then deploy their gifting. And by virtue of that, then we'll get, if anything, solid artists who then are worthy of being put on a platform.
Wow.
So I think our role primarily is developing disciples, because otherwise we'll end up with performers and no proclaimers. And as gospel artists, we want people who proclaim the gospel, not just through their ministry in terms of their song, but through the demonstration of their lives. And so I think that's the church's primary role, number one, is to help develop disciples. In terms of an industry now, and forgive me for being such a pedant, but language is interesting. Industry, for me,
deliberate on my part as well. Yeah,
cool. I hear you. Industry is an interesting statement, because industry for me, industry suggests business, suggests the laws of supply and demand.
Exactly.
And you will never have an industry where there is no demand. And so you can have lots of supply, but if there's no demand, you just end up with a scene.
Which is what we have.
So we have a gospel scene. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, I think our role as a church, I don't know about anybody else, I don't know about Ruach, we've got Bishop here, he can speak for himself. Great man of God, great church, doing phenomenal things. But from the TAB's perspective, our role is to recognize the gifts in the house, to help develop those people into disciples and help them deploy their gifts. And we have been so blessed. We've got, some geniuses in our church. We've got we've got Mike. Mike's MD, and Mike's a complete, as we say in the millennial generation, beast. I'm trying to be youthful here, as you can hear. We've got Lena and the gang, who's just a musical genius in terms of arrangements and stuff. And I think it would be a travesty if we had gifts like that and we didn't honor those gifts in the house. And one of the ways you honor those gifts is develop them, then deploy them.
Okay, so it's interesting. Brian, I'm coming to you now, live and direct in Atlanta. Give me 2 secs, because I like the way Ryan speaks. But it's interesting the way you kind of use the word responsibility and kind of singled it out. Because I think that's where you and I feel like you're saying the same thing as me, but then there I was like, I don't know. Because you said it's not your responsibility, but then you said it's your responsibility to identify gifts, develop them, and deploy them. So develop, for me, means you're helping the people hone those gifts. Now, there's different ways that can be. This isn't just all about money. Do you know what I mean? JC spoke of how she's been supported. It's not all financial. Some of it is just being given a platform. You know what I mean? Some of it is where it would have taken her out £3,500 just for venue hire. They gave it to her for free. That's financial. There's different ways. So for me, that's helping develop an artist, because you're giving her a platform. Then when it comes to deploy now, that's when it comes to now your supply, demand. For me, commerce starts coming into that element of the discussion, because deploy means to kind of go out. Now you've honed, all of a sudden, I feel like there will be a demand, or I feel like there is a demand, but I feel like that middle stage of development is not quite happening, which is what I feel Joseph was saying, in the middle. So I'm still trying to work out, I'm thinking on it, because I feel like we're saying the same thing, but then when you talk about responsibility, my first thing I thought of, well, if not the church's responsibility to identify and develop their creatives, then whose?
That wasn't your question, though. Your question was it the church's responsibility to help with the industry? So I don't think we can depart from this word industry. Because deployment, I deploy you on the platform in the church. And if you're a voice to the house, That's one thing, but being a voice to the nations is something else.
Okay.
There needs to be a demand for your voice in the nations before you're deployed in the nations. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, and it's fantastic because you've made a distinction where basically you're saying that the development of the creatives in the church, or this is what I heard you saying, is for the house, and anything outside of that then falls out of the church's remit in terms of responsibility.
No, I'm saying that I hear your point, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's not the church's responsibility to develop an industry. Our responsibility is to build people. And then if industry, remember, for me at least, in my elementary understanding of etymology, industry denotes business.
Commerce.
You're dealing with supply and demand. So that's a separate issue.
But who is the consumer of gospel music, if not the church? For me, it should be the number one consumer. Do you see what I mean? So I understand why you're making that distinction, but for me, the commerce aspect of it doesn't disassociate it from the church. For me, it actually brings it in, because gospel people need gospel people to buy gospel music, and the first place you're going to find that is in the church, which is the gospel.
I disagree, because you're trying to sell snow to Eskimos. Every Sunday,
I like it.
They've got gospel music.
I love it, Pastor.
So if you're really looking at the laws of supply and demand and under the auspices of the word industry, I'm just, let me talk through just briefly. This is your
no, it's all of us. While we're here, it's all of us. And we're gonna talk the team. Don't worry, I'm not gonna. We're coming to you, Ryan, next, and then Matty.
But you know, I mean, one of the issues for me, just to give an anecdote, I'm not saying this has happened, though it may have, but just an anecdote. If you've got a great worship team or great worship leader, JC is in her church, phenomenal. The church is being supplied. So then just to bring external people in who may not have the capacity or be at the level of JC, the people in the church are like, well, we want JC. Because JC is bringing something at a level where, because you've got lots of people out there who think they're the next Kirk or the next whoever else, you know. And that I think is one of the, I mean, this whole thing's layered. It's not just, there's not one silver bullet, you know. That's why there's a big panel discussing this. But I think one of the critical things is when it comes to the whole supply and demand, you've got to understand at the end of the day, the people, you're right, the church, and it's the people who should be receiving or the first consumers of gospel music, of the music ministry, but they're getting it every Sunday. So if you're already getting the supply for free, why would you then go and pay for it?
Larks. Ryan?
Rookie mistake.
I think I was muted. Sorry, can you guys hear me? Yeah. No, I mean, listening to what Pastor Michael was saying is really interesting, and I think I'm similar to you, Ivan, that there's a lot that I agree with, but I think that the actual question itself is, what responsibility does should the church play? Not necessarily whether or not it's responsible. That's
a different question.
No, but it is both. It's a question. So I'm asking you, does it have responsibility? Should it? Or no, it doesn't really. Do you see what I mean? It's a really kind of open. I try to make it as broad as possible, if you know what I mean. Keep going,
I think there's two sides to it, and especially when we're talking about the church, I think we have to sometimes be more specific with what we're talking about, because we could say all of us here are the church, or are we talking about church leadership? What responsibility do they play? Because then you might have two different answers. Because if we're talking about the responsibility of the church in general, that means that just we as gospel music consumers, or we as church goers, need to play just as much of a role as the pastors do. Then the other side to that is that, of course, the pastors are the ones that greenlight these artists to go on their stages. And so, if we're talking about supply and demands, sometimes it's hard to even have that conversation if there's not an industry where artists are even given a platform for people to even see whether or not there's going to be a demand for them. And especially now in the social media world, it's become such a difficult time for artists in general to cut through the noise. And so a lot of times churches are the only sometimes the only platforms where you're able to do that. For example, if an artist gets to perform at Megafest, you know there's a certain level of exposure that's going to come with it. If an artist, if we're going to bring it to the UK, if they do a concert at Ruach or KICC or at Pastor Agu's church, there's a certain level of exposure that comes with that. So I guess the what I would like to actually know from the pastors and leaders that we have here is the thought process that or the factors that are at play when it comes to inviting a particular artist to minister at the church. Now, of course, for me, like, and I'm always thinking with a business hat, so I'm like, okay, it's bums on seats, and who do people want to see? Everyone wants to see Tasha Cobbs, everyone wants to see Travis Green, right? That's just me as an outsider. That's what I would assume. They pick people based off of who they feel, is going to bring bums on seats, and that it's just, because even though it's ministry, there's a business side to it, and so you have to also consider that too. I don't want to bring in an artist and give them a full production, and then I don't make my money back because the church has got bills to pay and mouths to feed. So I'm interested to know from the pastor's mouths directly what the thought process is when it comes to giving artists their stage. So I don't know, Bishop.
Can I put
Bishop.
I was coming to you anyway.
Spanner in the works?
Please.
Please. And you see, my problem is I come from a different school of thought. And the problem I'm having, first of all, is that, as Pastor Michael said, words mean a whole lot to me. So when we hear the word UK gospel music, I have a problem with that terminology now, because I don't know if UK gospel or gospel exists anymore. We're now in the season of CCM music.
Wow.
That's another.
I need to say this.
Say it, Bishop. Say it.
It bothers me. And remember, I'm old school. I come from the gospel choir days, where gospel music in the sort of 80s, people get ready. The Hawkins, all of that era. And the problem I'm having now is when I hear gospel music, when the word gospel music, and we got to ask ourselves, are we talking about gospel music? What is it? Black gospel music? Yes. Or are we talking about, because when we talk about gospel music, we're talking about hard harmonies. We're talking about vocals, strong call and answer. That's the definition of gospel. Okay, but when we are now having in the brought to us, and I can talk about, because when we're looking about gospel, we can trace it to the Azusa Street, right down from the 1906 with J.C. Moore, that whole experience of Pentecostalism. And we're not talking about a black thing here now, we're talking about white and black. The Church of God in Christ, the assemblies of God, all of the churches that came out of Azusa Street. Then we've got the Thomas Dorsey expression. So when I hear the word gospel music, we don't really do it anymore, as how I know.
True.
Am I right or am I wrong? But if you look at the
we've
word,
had this discussion. Yeah.
So are we saying about artists? I think we need to get our question really clear. That's what I'm asking for. A clear understanding of what are we saying? Are we saying, should the church give an opportunity to the artists, the people, or nurture, and give them a platform? Is that what we're saying?
I think, can I jump in, Aaron?
Yeah, please, go.
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to establish, and again, that just could just be my own understanding or my own perspective, that the question is very specific about UK gospel, so when we look at our industry, we can all agree that it isn't perhaps where it could be or should be, in terms of if we look at the number of artists that we have that are even able to do what they do full time, or worship leaders that are able to do what they do full time, the kind of the quality of the music that's been put out, how much of it is being put out, the marketing aspect of it, how many of our songs that we sing in our churches today are by our own artists, artists here in the gospel music artists. I think we're trying to establish what role the church plays in pushing some of those things forward. And I think we had a conversation in the first season, and a lot of it comes back to the songs, right? So, how many of our songs are being sang in our churches. If you look back and what Mark was doing with Power Praise and all these songs that we were singing our own songs, that now changed for some reason. So how do we get back to that place where we are now, and not just when we say gospel, I think we should be more specific because gospel could include singing Fred Hammond's music.
And I'm asking the question again. I'm asking the question: are we talking about the black? Or, these are questions that ask. Be very clear about, because when we are being clear, then we can answer those questions that you're asking about.
Yeah,
because if I'm going to answer the question about these different groups that are out there, giving them an opportunity, we should give them an opportunity, but we need to also ask ourselves the question, when we talk about industry, do we have the mechanism? We don't own radio stations. We don't own the platforms that helps to have an industry. I don't think we have an industry.
Well,
that's what I was trying to say.
I agree with that.
Put it in a nicer way.
Yeah, I agree with that. So Bishop,
You know what I mean?
So Bishop, just to confirm what you were saying and give you an answer to what you're asking, we're talking about black gospel and the expressions that come out of the UK black church. So that.
Can we say black music instead of black gospel? Because I said I have a problem with that.
Okay.
It's different, unfortunately, because it's like, what is black music? That could be like NSG and Stormzy. That's black music, but are we gonna tie that into gospel music in this country? My question to the pastors on here, right, and just to us in general. I'm 24, so I'm in a 25. So I would say that I am, would you call me now generation or new generation or next generation, whatever. But I'm the emerging, right? If there is no music industry in the church, as basically we just said, right? There's no music industry, right? How comes that is so? And whose responsibility would it be to create such an industry? Because I guess we would all benefit from it. And like Ryan said, back in the day, he was saying that Mark Beswick and all those guys back then, I wasn't around, so I wouldn't know. You were saying that they were singing the songs, right? Yeah. So I'm sure there's some cool, great gospel artists out right now, but I don't see much churches in the country singing their songs. So it's not, I don't feel like we're linked together. I feel like my church, I go to an older school church, like
What's the name of the church?
Kojic, right? She knows because she's from there as well.
Come on, come on.
But it's like we don't necessarily sing like other people's songs. I'm not saying that's like it's terrible or it's wrong, but I feel like we could if we're gonna try and build each other. Do you know what I mean? Or build some UK gospel artists. Obviously, if the standard is good, but I'm sure there's some great songs that I feel like if we was linked and if we knew that they existed, we would. But I feel like everyone's doing their own thing separately.
Okay.
But I feel like if we was to maybe link, maybe we could build something together, and maybe that would build a music industry in a whole, than supposed to actually like building our own separate things in our churches. If you get what I mean?
I also think that there was. Listen to what Bishop Francis was saying. There was a UK black gospel industry.
And what
there was, because as I said, I can talk about from there, and I'm sure Bishop would remember this. They would have the UK Black Gospel Awards. So you'd have Inspirational Choir winning awards. You'd have Jones and Co. Winning awards. You'd have the Wades winning awards. So there was a UK black gospel scene. There's no two ways about it. In Birmingham, you'd have the Prophecy Mass Choir.
Scene.
No, we have a scene,
Joseph.
So
are we saying that there's never been an industry in this country? Oh, okay.
There's never been an industry.
I think there was kind of an industry.
I think the fact
I think it was.
Because you'd have Jones and Co doing their funding their own album. You'd have Inspirational Choir doing, And hence,
structure.
if there wasn't an industry, I don't think we would have been
But
able
guys,
to.
guys,
Okay, can I enter?
If there was, sorry, but let me just finish this last point. If there wasn't an industry, I don't think there'd be people get ready.
Okay, go to that.
When I say there wasn't an industry, let me explain what I'm saying. In terms of black people or black gospel pushing the industry. Now, we want people to get ready because of ITV. We were on radio because of Capital. It was the secular stations that were pushing the gospel. We had Capital Gospel. Capital Gospel used to have a section. Choice FM had gospel on these secular stations. That was pushing the music, but it wasn't the industry. We didn't own anything. And the only ones who owned anything was Word Records, Integrity, which was the white industry.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was not a black industry.
Okay.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's come to Pastor Mike White.
yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Forgive me for being the pedant here.
It's essential.
Listen, you don't want to start me on here. But the issue is language. I don't think we can have. When I was learning how to debate and have discussions in school, they always told us you must get your terms right. Number one,
100%.
and I think we can't keep interchanging the words scene and industry.
Exactly. Right.
Industry. But if you look at a dictionary, I mean, last time I checked, it's dealing with words like trade, commerce, business. So just because you've got people, he had choirs that my brother Joseph mentioned. I'm never knocking that. Of course, we all know what was going on. People get ready, phenomenal. Bishop, everybody else, Basil, the whole 9 yards. Okay, but industry is the issue that I'm struggling with. So if you want to remove the term industry from the table, that's a different conversation. But once you talk about industry, you're talking about supply, demand, you're talking about commerce, you're talking about trade. The industry didn't have gospel music had more aid than trade. Aid as in handouts, help. That's a different issue from trade. You mentioned one of the choirs, I can't remember which one it was, Joseph, that you mentioned that funded its own album. That's not industry.
That's independent.
No, that's not industry.
That's not industry.
That's the point.
Because we could get caught up in those terminologies, but I think if we're talking about, because even if we're talking about industry simply means just to trade, right? Now, gospel music in this country is not at a level where perhaps, like, again, it should be. Sure. But there is still trading going on. It's the state of the industry is not where it needs to be. I mean, I would argue that there is still one, but it's fragmented. It's not. It doesn't have the structure that it perhaps needs to have. But there are artists out there that are selling records. There are artists out there that are performing at churches. Money's being exchanged and business is happening. It's just not happening at the level that it needs to be. And especially if we're comparing it to other industries. If we look at the States or if we look at the pop industry, of course, when we compare ours, it's like, okay, can we even really call it one at this point? But I mean, there is still exchange is happening. It's just not at a level where I think we all want it to be, which is why we're having this discussion.
I agree with Ryan.
Yeah. All right.
100%.
So Smooth.
Ecology.
Yes, Noah.
No, just appeared from nowhere.
Hey, like a thief in the night.
But I sorry, can I just add that I will say just I think to what Bishop was saying, even though I said what I said, I think the challenge is that we don't own the industry, and Bishop made that very clear. Like even when that was happening, it was all owned by the outsiders. So there is an industry, but we haven't formulated one to the point where it makes sense for us, and we don't own it.
So
Everybody has to agree.
Sorry. I know you're gonna come in. But just give me 2 seconds. I'm going to come to you, and then I want to come to Smooth and Alicia, because lots of people have things to say. But I want to pick up on what Pastor Mike said about terminology. We're exactly the same. And remember when you said it before, I said my use of language is deliberate. I'm talking. We have a scene. A scene just denotes.
Absolutely.
You're cool.
Absolutely.
At that. So I want to see it.
And you've got a little gig in a corner, and we'll come
Exactly.
and hear you. And pay our 50p on the door. That ain't industry.
Industry is Tab Worship put out an album, and it can't be at Tab where they hold the concert. because too many people want to come, so you have to hire out the XL, you have to hire out Wembley Arena, etc. Because there's a demand for the music that they're putting out. I don't think that's too unachievable for us in the UK. So I'm talking about industry.
Let me throw something. I do think that's unachievable, but for different reasons, which we can talk about in a minute.
That's cool. And where we've got to, where what Bishop's saying about, so I'm just trying to bring the conversation in, where Bishop's talking about we don't own anything.
Yeah.
That's actually the foundation of my question.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying we don't own anything, and I'm like, okay, well, surely in Christendom, the church should be the biggest investor.
Yeah.
Because we all pay into it. Like, we're all vexed right now because we can't work, right? Generally over the year or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So the government's having to sub us, right?
Yeah.
We pay into the church, and I don't want to talk about like tithes and all that kind of thing transactionally. I'm just talking about we sow into the church. So for me, the church should be the biggest investing body into an industry. Not me as a sole proprietor, not Smooth. Even if I've got a passion for gospel, even if I know so much about it, I personally think the church should be the biggest conglomerate of investors into owning radio stations, into funding albums of people in there. So you've identified that person's dope. And you know what? It can even be with an ulterior motive of it's going to make me money because it's going to make the church money. So I'm cool with that business, commerce, industry element of identifying talent in your church and saying, we're going to do this. All right, so let's jump to Smooth. Sorry, let's jump to Noel, then to Smooth.
No, I was just saying, the ecology, Bishop summed up something. He said, we don't own anything apart from our church buildings. Radio stations, TV stations, we don't have that. My ministry is succeeded on technically handouts from people who go, wow, I really believe in what you're doing, and I'm going to give you this amount of money to do this and do that. I'm able to hold ownership because I don't let go of the vision. But I think that our ecology as an industry is not there. Every component is needed. I call it, before the shutdown happened, for those who don't know, I was organising a UK tour. I began to realise that I'm one of the first in this generation, if that makes sense, to do a UK tour that is actually financed by myself, financed and energised by my ministry, to actually go into arenas and communities where quote unquote black music is not the known thing. And I think that the ecology is needed. The only way I could do it was I had to approach church leaders in each place who I had relationship with and gave them the story of trying to develop a touring circuit for not just me, but for many artists that we could step out of some of the four corners of, let's say, our localities, London, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, where black people are. And actually, I believe that the church is the catalyst for it around the nation, because until we get ourselves to Noel Robinson doing 10,000 people a night, which that's, unless I'm invited to a conference, that's not going to happen, right? Unless I have a song that everybody goes, yeah, we're going to go and see this guy. So I feel that ecology is important. And when I use the word ecology, how the black church movement, we're the most powerful, creative music people. Our music, everybody wants it. The world wants it. That's why our musicians are out there doing this stuff, because they want that church thing. And whether our feelings about that, but yet still, on a whole, our churches don't go, hey, actually, why don't we, not around general I'm talking, why don't we actually just capture this thing and do something with it that actually helps to create this groundswell. Without the members of the church buying my product, I ain't got nothing. Albums selling 12, 15,000 copies, that's the kind of copies that I sell. I mean, at the moment, no, because of the streaming stuff, but without the churches buying it, I don't have an ecology. Hence why the churches really need to be involved in how we push forward, whether it's songs or artists, allowing platforms, allowing artists to come on the platforms. And I'm not just talking about me, but there's many artists. In actual fact, my whole generation died out because there was no platforms. I'm looking at, I'm 50 odd, near 60, and I'm looking at an artist my age, and I'm going, where are they? Where in America, you've got 60, 65-year-old artists still cooking, still doing stuff, still making a living. And I go, if our platforms die out, that's my only thing. If our platforms die out, then a whole generation behind doesn't have anything to even aim at, And I'm grateful for the platforms that have really opened up to me, for real. I'm probably, 40 events deep a year on different church platforms. And I go, whoa, but I look and I go, I don't see anyone else. And that's not because I'm trying to say it's me, but I look and I go, whoa, where are other artists? And that's because I get to do KRCC, because when KRCC had 150 people, I helped Pastor Matthew put together his worship team. He's never ever forgotten that. This is what it's relationship, but where do we have this ecology that says, here is an artist that, we really believe in, let's give them a platform, let's give them experience, let's support their ministry. And I think our platforms have the ability to do that, to encourage, at least.
I agree.
Yeah.
But at what point do artists take responsibility for creating their own platforms then?
Good.
Like I said, I planned my own tour. My tour wasn't financed by a church. I had to pay for the churches at reduced rates to bring my tour to the church. My tour was costing me now £8,000 a night. £8,000 a night over 10 dates. That's £80,000. Man, that's a step of faith to even push that. But I'm at the place where I have to do that. And what I was doing, I was bringing younger artists who I know can't do that. I was bringing them on the bill and saying, okay, come and do this. I'm going to honor you, but come and do this so other people can get to see you. Yeah. So I think that there's a place where we all have to look for our platforms, always. But it's where I think the church can help.
Okay.
And also, was you going to jump to Smooth, wasn't it?
Yeah, go on, Smooth.
Yes, Ryan, he was coming to me. I'm joking. No, I've got mixed feelings. I feel like I have to agree with my pastor because my pastor.
I love that, man.
But I think because I've come from a world where I've gone outside and harnessed certain skills and had certain experiences, I believe that there are certain key people within the church that if they're given certain ways to develop what they have, we can create the gospel industry the ideal gospel industry that everybody's talking about. There's people that are in marketing, there's people that are in PR, there's people that are in finance, there's people that are like us musicians who have gone out and we know how to play. There's people who understand production management and understand how to set up a stage and how to make it look good, and how to make it look a certain way and be professional, be to a high standard. There's people who understand how to manage time and can say, okay, cool, let's get this at a certain time. They can put things in place that can make the show, like make a show. And I know it's ministry, but we have to also look at the show aspect of things as well, so that it becomes something that is a demand. And I think it is a responsibility of the church to identify it and help to develop it so that it can become, suddenly comes from being fragmented to becoming that thing that we need. Yeah. And then it can start to generate income for, as what you were saying, it could generate income for the church and also the particular artist that is working for. And then what happens is that we form a record label and that we do own something because I mean, it does disappoint me to hear that we haven't got a record label or I mean, I think we need more than one. I don't think we just have
this
one.
is my
No,
point.
but this is
what
I'm saying
saying.
not even just one. That hurts, man.
But I think, I think, I don't get me wrong. I don't think it's all of the church's responsibility.
Yeah.
But I think if it's identified and sewn into, as not necessarily financially. It might be a thing of, okay, there might be a free course that can be, okay, you know, I've seen this free course, this would be good for this person. You know what, here's access to it, because there's certain things, because the church has access to for certain things because they're charities. So there's certain things that become available to them at discounted prices or even free. And do you know what I mean? And I think if that is identified and built upon, then we can have the as I said, the ideal industry that we're looking for.
Okay, go on, Pastor.
No, I totally agree with what Mike said. I think I'd like to respond to some of the points Noel raised. I don't know if he was intentional in some of the things he said, but what I took from some of it. Number one, well, let me talk about the tab real quick. You know, we are 100% behind as much as we can the UK gospel scene.
Evidently.
Okay, not just by virtue of the tab worship brand, but also by, I mean, we've had JC on more than one occasion, Noel on more than one occasion. You know, we support UK gospel 100%, and we're intentional about that. Of course, we'll have American artists as well. I've got a lot of American artist friends, and we'll have them over, but we won't just be Americanized. One of the biggest, in my opinion, things that we need to recognize, and this goes back to ethnicity, is that as a black people, let's quickly climb outside of music. I know this is about gospel music, but just generally, we are still over enamored with Americans. And so I think two things we need to be careful of. Number one, comparing America's gospel industry with the UK. You're dealing with 40 million black people in America, 90% of which would classify themselves almost in a monolithic way as African American. Whereas in the UK, we've got just between 2 and 3 million black people. Then you've got the subcultures within that. So you've got your Nigerians, your Ghanaians, your Caribbeans, Then now we've got this new evolution, which is black British, who don't really care about Nigeria, Caribbean differences. They're like, we're black Brits. And I think we've got to look at the evolution of that and realize that, number one, we've got to stop comparing ourselves with America. And so I don't see how it's going to be possible for us to do the American thing, right? By virtue of numbers. Number two, I think we've got to be careful of the fact that many of our people are, even in the acting industry, are over enamored with America. I remember it was Idris who said that he wasn't respected in the UK until he made it in America. Then all of a sudden black people in the UK took him seriously. And so there's those, I'm saying there's some other issues outside of church and outside of course, that are really important to us really being able to focus on the development of the UK gospel scene, if you want to call it that, into an industry. But one of the critical things as well is I think it's important. Now this is something I'm sure Noel will jump on once I've said this as well, is that we need to understand the evolution of blackness. So we have a black British culture now. So therefore, if there's a black British culture, I think it's important that we stop trying to be American and come up with our own sound. And then, because that's what's happening in the secular industry. Stormzy don't sound like an American. There's a whole that's black British, and by virtue of that, now they've got their own industry. There's a black. I remember growing up, the best we could get in terms of black celebrity was Lenny Henry, and the man who said fried onion rings on the advert. We'd all get excited at some of you. I'm showing my age there. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But now we've got black British celebrities, which have their own industry. If America never wanted to touch Stormzy, Stormzy's still paying his mortgage. Do you know what I'm trying to say to you? And so I think, and that came out of developing an independent black British sound. And I think if the church, I'm kind of merging what I'm saying a little bit with what Bishop was saying about the evolution of gospel. I think we need to recognize that there needs to be a development of a sound. And that's one of the things we focused on at the tab, is not just trying to sound American, not just trying to sound CCM, not just trying to sound gospel, but export the sound of the house. And I think that then has created the modicum demand that we're sensing from in terms of tab worship.
Can I go to Ryan? Sorry, I just want to go to Bishop, because since we spoke before, I feel like the conversation's kind of shifted and we've got a little bit more clarity about what we're talking about and stuff. Bishop, how do you feel about some of the points that have been raised so far before we come to Ryan?
So many things, as we said. I one of the things for some of you, and please don't take this in the wrong way, I think the whole history of our church, we have not got our history documented. And unfortunately, some of them who holds the history has died. I'm trying to work on something. I know there's a book just come out by my brother, but when we look at what we call the Windrush churches, and I say the Windrush churches because that's how we all developed the Kojaks, the Church of God of Prophecy, New Testament, Bible Way, Church of Our Lord Jesus Christ, and I can go on with the names, Firstborn, etc., and NTA. These churches, most of the churches, their headquarters was in America. Okay? We were all influenced by the gospel music in America. Now, one of the problems why a lot of things went wrong, or what became difficult, shall I say, not went wrong, but became difficult for us, was a lot of the churches, although they were operating in the UK, they were governed by the headquarters in America. A lot of things that we talk about, and I was listening to the last season of when you were speaking, and one of the things that needs to be brought here is every church was very isolated. Now, church is different to how it was back then, very isolated. The new T stayed with themselves. The prophecy stayed with themselves. Because they came out of each other, there was this strong thing about new T and prophecy, Church of God of Prophecy and the flag, etc. Then you had the apostolics, Church Bible Way, and I'm sure Pastor White will understand what I'm talking about there, where again, because of doctrinal differences of the baptism, there was such a divide, okay, amongst us. So when we talk about musical industry, forget we couldn't even worship with each other. You know, I don't want to sound.
That's what I said on the first.
I want to bring some clarity, because if I don't say it, nobody's going to know. I probably was one of the ones who broke all of that. I was the only one that I knew was invited to a new T, to a prophecy outside of their organization. They would never invite anybody outside their organization. That was unheard of. When I started my church, I had a lot of apostolics. That was like unheard of. And then they wouldn't want to know, what name am I going to baptize people? And I baptized people in Jesus' name. Then the people from the Trinitarians started to say, oh, he's turned Jesus only. You don't understand the challenge that was happening around those times. Now, when it comes to sort of those days, I have done a whole lot in terms of supporting what we call the gospel music back then. I can give you instance. Every time we had a conference, had musicians, I had Americans and I had British. Those are the days I used to have Holy Convocation. And then afterwards, back in the day, I started a thing called Praise 2000, which was strictly for the UK artists. Everyone was invited. I got demonized by my own people. In fact, I ended up not doing it because everyone started to say, why am I doing it? And I was doing it as a platform to bring everyone together. In fact, that's how I was speaking to Bishop Wayne Malcolm. He said that was a platform for him to cross over from his denomination. It was, I did things like Order My Steps conference. I brought Raymond and Co. That time they were the first group that we had that was kind of out there. And I needed someone who basically of an excellence that I could represent us. I not only did that, it was preachers I brought there as well. I brought Roger Samuels, paid for them, brought them, gave them a platform. In fact, Raymond and Co. was able, because the Lord gave me favor with Jan and Paul Crouch. I was hosting. I got Raymond and Co. to go on TBN. I can list off a whole lot of stuff that I have done for gospel music to help promote gospel music. I've gave platforms to people who don't even want to tell people that I gave them platforms. Today who are where they are because of the platforms and access I've given. But the point I'm trying to make is when we're talking about we should be further, we need to understand the challenges that was happening in those days. Now, I could do what I did because I moved away from the establishment, but there was a price that I had to pay for that. And I was able, because of the money that our church was able to collect, the things we do, to do the things that I was able to do. I was able to bring artists to America because After that, we had paid off for Brixton location. We were debt free. So we had excess money to do things. But over the years, if I be honest, it's not been so easy. It's not been so easy. The world has changed again. The music industry has changed again. But we have to look at the reasons why all of these things, because yes, we should have been owning radio stations. We should own. I bought a television station, and I'm going to tell you this: the establishment came against me. I had to sell it. And the reason why I bought a television station was I was hoping to use it as a platform for our people and the establishment. And I could tell you some stuff, but I don't want to go in there. They came against me. They shut doors on me.
So that's the factor.
Can I just say,
It comes to what I was saying at the beginning.
Go on.
It basically, as I said, I respect what Michael said, and I agree in that sense of like some of the things you were saying about the language, and because I do think it's two kind of separate entities. But again, it falls back to what I'm saying in the sense of the church could have done so much to have helped us establish an industry, because there was a scene. As I said, I'm 50 years old, and from when I'm growing up,
You're
and
50?
yeah,
You look good.
and from when I'm seeing people get ready, I was a little kid watching Bishop, and Noel was one of the pioneers of prophecy, and I'm seeing this whole thing as a kid. Sitting at home, and I'm thinking, wow, I'd love to do it. If you was to speak to any secular musician from church, and you say to them, would you want to be full-time in secular world or church? 90%, I imagine, would say church. And so I do feel that the church has a responsibility in some cases, because again, what Bishop was saying, growing up in prophecy, he's right, we wasn't allowed to mix with other denominations. And I think it was probably when I was about 14, it was like, okay, I could play in another denomination or whatever. So there has been a lot of harm done, where I feel the church can help repair that, and some kind of industry. I still stand on that.
Okay, Alicia, then Ryan.
No, it's good to hear Bishop talk about that, because you know what, Bishop, I'm going to be honest with you. Rap, to me, in the past few years, speaking to other people, and that have spoken to me as well, have come across like they're just American pro. So to hear that you've actually done all these things is good to hear that. Do you understand? I'm not trying to say you have to speak your business to everybody, but it's actually good to hear the things that you've tried to achieve. It's a shame that you haven't achieved them due to people, because I wouldn't really care. If they didn't die across from me, I don't care. I'm just being honest. Wait. I'm just being honest. If they didn't die across from me, I really don't care. I won't lose sleep. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's a shame that you didn't achieve these things, because we need those.
He wasn't able to. When they stand in front of you.
But that goes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. If everybody was to support that vision back then or whenever it may be, it would have been hard for him to stop. Because everyone would have been back behind it, everyone would have been supporting.
Instead of him having to do it by himself.
Yeah, but instead of for him having to do it by himself. But it's just like, if it's not somebody, if it's not you doing it, or if it's not our organization doing it, it's kind of like we ain't really trying to link arms. But we should all link together. I don't understand why
we can.
It's been that. And obviously, that's why I said before I spoke that I'm 24. So all of what you guys are saying is also education as well, because I ain't been around. And all those stuff that you guys say, I ain't been around those days. And what's scary to hear you guys even say also is that there's no UK gospel music industry. At first I didn't agree when you said it. Now I definitely do agree with it. I do think that there is a scene, but what's so scary as well, right? I'm a drummer, I'm a musician, right? And like Uncle Joe said, if you was to ask 90% of the musicians in this country, would you rather do gospel or would you rather do secular? to be honest, I wouldn't be one of those 90 that would be like, I would play in church.
Good.
That's not my vibe at
Good.
all.
Good.
Yeah. So I wouldn't even. I'm not gonna even pretend. But that is true that most.
Go to. I only do arenas.
Yeah, I only headline Glastonbury. So yeah, I wouldn't be one of those musicians. I never have been. But what I will say is the scary thing is that I may be one of the only people from the black church, under 25, that work in the secular industry as a musician at the height that I do. And if I wasn't to do that, I would most probably lean on the church and the gospel industry,
Right.
UK gospel industry, to support me.
Yeah.
But to hear you guys say it, that there's no industry, I can't even imagine to stop to do what I'm doing. So like, it's just a background, and what I was going to do as well is kind of make it a balance as well. I don't think that the church has not supported everyone in its entirety. The church has definitely supported. Like, I'm producing my cousin's record at the moment, Becca Folks. Check it out when it comes out. Right?
Thank you.
We don't necessarily have the money to go to recording studio. So my church gave us the building for a week. We got the equipment down and we recorded inside the building. Basically turned the building into a recording studio and recorded it. So I can't say like, yeah man, the church ain't done anything and you know, but what I'm saying is together, when Bex brings out our album, I don't see other churches in this country necessarily singing it because they're doing their own thing.
Go on, Ryan.
I'm not necessarily, one second, bro. When I finish, one second.
Let me land.
Right? So I'm not necessarily saying that they need to. Yeah. I'm not necessarily that they need to sing her songs. But I don't necessarily, it's like, cool. Let's say there's a gospel artist in this country right now that everybody is singing their song. I can only think of Rain. And that was how long ago?
Years ago.
That's like 10 years ago. And if we're gonna sit here and be like, oh yeah, all the music that everyone's brought out is not being to a par that we can sing. No, it has been because we're not interested. We're just not really interested, to be fair. Because look, we have.
That's what Pastor Mike said.
Pastor Mike has brought out an album. How many other churches have sung that album?
I think.
Alright, go Ryan.
Sorry, go on.
No, it's you.
To me?
I landed now, big man. I landed.
Oh, sorry. I remember just off Matty's point and to kind of what everyone's saying. I remember Donald Lawrence once told me that when his album, I think it was the Law of Confession album came out. I think it was 2009 or something. That a church bought like 7,000 copies of his album and gave it to the membership for free. Gave it to the church for free, right? I won't say what church it was, but that speaks to the level of relationship that he had with that particular pastor. And a lot of, and I think Muyi had shared a similar story a while ago, actually, that he'd done a similar thing with one of his albums. I think it was New Wine Church, when one of his albums came out, and he literally, the pastor bought about like a couple thousand copies and just gave it to the church for free. Oh, right. So now, what I'm not saying is that every church should do that. What I'm referring to is the level of relationship that he had with that particular pastor, why he was able to do that. The reason why Noel was able to tour in the places that he is because of the level of relationship that he has with the pastor. I think a lot of these artists, if we're honest, the church has a responsibility, but you can't be lazy, man. I think this takes work, and a lot of these artists need to focus on building those types of relationships. Now, of course, you can't come out the gate and expect to have a relationship with Bishop Francis or Michael White because they're operating at a high level. You've got to start with these smaller local churches, and those churches are actually collectively more powerful because if you can get, the average church is not the size of Ruach or the size of KICC. The average church is what I think Noel was saying, like 150, right? But if you can collectively build relationships with these churches one by one, that's how you're able to really get your songs into these places. You can't think just because you've got a few thousand followers on social media, everyone should be singing your song. The reason why Miranda comes to Ruach is because of the level of relationship that she has with Bishop Francis. The reason why Israel comes to the Tab is because of the relationship that he has. And that's how industries work. Period. So if we're talking about building an industry, we have to also focus on, are these artists putting in enough work to build the relationships with the people that can give them these platforms? Because it's just that's how it works. And I'm not saying it should be all about relationships, but I think a lot of these artists make assumptions that platforms should be given to them.
No.
because of X, Y, and Z.
So let me say this. So I'm going to say.
Can I just say something here?
Jason. All right, Jason, you ready to hear from Jason now?
Just to say, Bishop mentioned the reason why the difficulty of building an industry was all those years ago. I was the head of music in the Church of God of Prophecy, Joseph.
Yep.
I was like, everything came through me. When I joined Inspirational Choir, they sacked me from every position.
Prophecy, not
Facts.
inspirational.
Facts.
That's the intensity. I'm going to let you know. I was stripped of my national work, my district work, even my local church. I was no longer the church music director.
Facts.
Simply because that's how deep it was in those days. So I get where the story started and where we are now. And I believe that things are so different. I mean, there's churches I stand on, platforms I stand on now, is that they wouldn't even talk to a black man, let alone, anyway, there's races in it now, you know? So I wanted to, like, in response to Matty's question, is that our journey...
You've got 1 minute, yeah?
Yeah, I'm going to finish right now anyway. Our journey, we have to take into consideration that some of the stuff that we achieved back there, people get ready, all that kind of stuff, was actually immense. But there was a putting together and there was a cost. It's a cost why you can go and do mainstream and nobody don't put you to sit back bench. Because some of us lost everything because we worked with other Christians. I had Tab Church came to sing at Tubbs Road and they began to sing reggae. I got plastered all over the church after the jamboree. How you can bring these people to come and sing reggae, blah, blah, blah. No, sit down. You're not. This is what I had to go through to fight for this place. Hence why it's important that we do listen to what Bishop's saying. But we also have the opportunity amongst us to build something and take advantage of this opportunity, this discussion. So put some stuff on meat. Let's put something in the meat because I'm ahead of some of this stuff. So I just want to encourage us in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's about action as well, definitely, 100%. JC?
And I was just going to say that, like, I'm still kind of reeling off what Pastor White said and just thinking about the church and responsibility. And I think as a worship leader, or as an artist, I think we've put too much onus on the church to give us handouts to do something. And I think that we as artists need to be in a place to understand that the church is there to develop us, but they're not there to develop us as the voice to the nation. That's not their, it's not their job to do that, because if God has called me to the nation, then I need to work to get to the nation. I can't expect Pastor White to be like, okay, JC, thank you very much for coming to my church. Right, we're gonna go here. There are other people that will probably have the same level of experience that I do, but I have to work and show. The Bible says that we should study ourselves and show ourselves approved, right? If I don't study myself, and if I don't study my craft, and if I don't study the different houses and the different leaderships that sit under that, then I will never understand what it is to be deployed into the world. Does that make sense? Completely. And so for me, I think that, yes, the church has the responsibility to develop us and to look at that creativity, but I also believe that once the church has developed us, it is our responsibility to build so that we can be deployed. And I don't think we necessarily take ownership of being built. Everybody's looking at the social media numbers, everybody's looking at how many follows and how many likes I get, but nobody's actually saying to themselves as an individual, what relationship am I building, not with the church, but with the people that are meant to be listening to my music?
Yeah.
So,
no, 100%.
What I'm against that is that the platforms that you see.
No, I'm talking, fam. Hold on. I'm only joking.
I can't hear everything here.
It wasn't that clear.
Sorry. I'm only playing. But I'm 100% behind JC. But from me, this is just a personal thing for me now. I'm not saying any other pastor, and I'm sure I'll get lambasted for this statement. But I'm really with Matt. I'm really with Matty on something he said earlier. Because to be honest, what I hear sometimes is mixed things. I hear some musicians in church who really want the church to be their fallback.
Wow.
And so they're pushing for an industry because they want to be full time. They don't want to hold on, man. They don't want to pack shelves in ASDA. They don't want to. They want the church to fund them, and that's not the church's responsibility. Otherwise, but what I love about what Matty said, and this is me theologically. My theology tells me that I don't think my musicians should have to just play in church. Don't get me wrong, we honor our musicians. We're, as a church at the Tab, we are very honoring. We believe not just, some churches it's only the pastor that gets honor. We're not into that. We believe in honoring give honor to whom honor is due. And if we've got gifts in our church, then we honor those gifts rightfully. But I'm also a believer in the fact that, many of my musicians should be playing in the secular world. They should be the light in the darkness. That's why our responsibility as a church is to develop disciples.
Come on.
So that they're so strong. They don't just minister in church. I want my musicians playing for Adele, playing for Beyonce, playing for whoever else. I actually, as a pastor, want them there. I get excited seeing them on the stage.
We're about to wrap up. Thank you, Pastor.
Let me just jump in on that, what Michael's saying.
And I know, I'm not saying every pastor.
What I'm saying, it's so refreshing to hear that. Because the thing is, I'm coming from a school where we would be battered by our pastors.
So I'm coming from the same school.
We'd be battered. I'd be on top of the pops one week, and then the following week on a youth convention, they're preaching about me being on. So it's refreshing to hear that, because sadly, people from my era, and Noah will back me up on this, we didn't get that.
My MD plays for secular artists. The big brain of a lot of Tab worship, Lena, just last week she's arranging for Ellie Goulding. They're doing all these things, and yet but they're strong enough to maintain their discipleship in those spheres.
Which is I wish I had you as a pastor years ago, because this is what I'm saying.
Matty, this comes from Matty, then Alicia, then myself.
It's refreshing to hear pastors say that, right? And as I said before, and I'm not bragging about it, I'm actually pretty sad about it. What I'm saying is that I'm 24 and the guys younger than me, I haven't seen them push the boundaries in the secular world as I have done so. And that's because it's even more harder now. No one's working. It's a pandemic. So what I'm saying is the fact that there is no industry, what will they do? Who will they play for? How will they minister? Well, they're just going to minister at church without an industry. Or online. No, we need to create something now to actually hone in these things. You say that it's not our responsibility. Yes, it is. We need to be A&R. Where's our A&Rs? We need to be scouting for these next praise and worship leaders. We need, where's our managers? We need, management companies. You guys have so much knowledge. How do you have so much knowledge and you don't have any management companies, A&R companies, record labels? Who gets to hear this information? Ryan saying, you have to build your relationship with you. Someone that goes to a storefront church in Tottenham most probably wouldn't even dream or be next to or even have a conversation to these pastors. So the pastors that they're used to, they have no information. They're still talking about people get ready, and that was 30 years ago. It don't make no sense. We need some infrastructure. We need, and as much as we run away from it, we need it. Personally, that's my opinion.
Alicia,
we need it, man.
In all of this, I'm hoping that there is going to be some sort of change. It's not close.
No, it's good.
So some sort of change. But I want to say this, not just to pass what you've already told me, that you're different. You know what I mean? Which I like. And bishops here. But I want all the pastors and bishops to hear this on this live. Yeah. When we do develop, please appreciate your UK. Musicians and artists, because we hear a lot of churches that pay more to Americans than they do UK. For some reason, we don't know why, but it doesn't make us feel good. So when we do develop, please, I'm begging you, appreciate your UK musicians and artists, please, because it's going to happen. There is going to be a development. It's going to happen, because this is the only platform I've seen where musicians and singers and bishops and pastors are
Sat
in the
down
same
at the
room.
round table.
Wow.
Do you understand? I've never seen. I did preparing the soldiers. Do you understand? And I still didn't even have. I didn't really invite no pastors and bishops. To be fair, do you know what I'm saying? But do you know what I mean? I think it would have been hard to do so. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Completely,
But I'm saying, I'm begging you, when this does flourish, please appreciate your own. It's important.
You as musicians, though, also need to honour
Yes.
each other.
Yes.
And like even people like Noel, Noel, and I'm not saying that because he's online.
Yeah.
When you think about the stuff that Noel at his, and I'm not dissing you, Noel, but at his age, you know, as a, I guess, more mature person in the UK gospel scene, UK Christian music gospel scene. But the stuff that's come out of people like him, I think that there's a whole generation now of gospel artists and musicians that need to honour people like him.
100%.
For what he's done. And Bishop. And Bishop.
Yeah.
100%.
I want to say last thing. Uncle Noel. Wait, hold on. Uncle Noel. I just want to say on behalf of the musicians and whatever of my generation, I'm so thankful. Yeah, and even hearing some of the stuff that you guys had to go through, Bishop, Pastor Michael White, I appreciate you, and I'm sure if they were here now, because I feel like I'm here speaking for them,
100%.
I totally appreciate everything. I didn't know Bishop had like what you say,
TV
like,
station
the
and all
TV
that.
No, like the two. He said he made like something 2000. I didn't know all of that,
Oh,
and he
Pretty
stopped,
Fat.
and he stopped because of people. Like totally appreciate that, and thank you very
good to
much.
hear.
It's good to hear, man.
Yeah, it's good to
thank
hear.
you.
Can I also, you know, again, I think there's a lot of myths out there, and I don't always like to blow my own trumpet, but sometimes you need to let people know what history is. We were one of the first church to pay musicians in the country. We were, most of the musicians that was in my church were on tours. They went on tours, came in, and the challenge again, there's all dynamics that used to happen as well. When some of these musicians came back to church after coming from a tour, there were members in my own church who rose up and other musicians who were angry at the fact that basically they could go off. There's so many dynamics that you all have to take into consideration that used to happen. And right now, the world has changed. The church world has changed. A lot of the things that you all now appreciate, as we're saying, we had to go through a whole lot. And until today, some of the things that's been said about me are not true. Some of the things that go out is just totally not true. They're talking about, you know, musicians not being paid. We were the first persons to pay musicians. We were the first in the whole of the country. Again, one of the problems that, and I say it's a problem, Ruach, we have a big platform. We have a big platform in terms of a name. And again, another myth is that, you know, we have all of these Americans coming over. But sometimes a lot of the people come to our church. They invite themselves. Most of them invite themselves. And most of them, and I know they're going to watch this. Okay, listen, I'm going to show you something. I wanted to do an event. And I'm going to be honest. This event was going to be a black version of what's that tent thing that happens in
David's tent.
the big church day out. I just bought 24 acres of land. We got it, and I was gonna do a black version of that. I went to speak to Matt to hire tents, etc., PA system, and what have you. I didn't realize how much it was costing, and you got to understand. I just bought land. I just bought the Gorman State Theatre. I just bought Walthamstow building. And, you know, if I tell you like our budget as a church, you will probably, you know, choke the amount of money we have to raise. So I was going to have this event. And then when I found out how much it was costing, I thought, no, let me do it at Kilburn. I went on social media and I asked, who would you like to see come to this event? I was surprised. It was a British event I was trying to do. Not one of our people named any British artist. Not one of our people.
And Bishop, that's my point about that people being enamored with Americanism. That's not just a gospel thing, that's even actors, everything. It's an issue with black Brits. Black Brits are still enamored with Americans. And I love my American friends.
Can I just finish this? Can I just finish this and I'll let you go? So I did this, and then when I did that, I got hit up, I'm making it clear, by James Fortune and said, can I come? Okay, now I want you to understand, all right? Okay, number one, I know what people get paid in America, and I know what they get paid sometimes over here by the churches who really want them. So they will go over and above to pay a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
Bishop John Anthony Francis, I will honor you, but I am not going overboard. And I'm not going to do anything that I know that I'm going to be worried about the church's money. I'm a steward of God's people's money.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, there's a lot of myth out there and what have you about Ruach City Church. But, you know, I'm going to come out with a documentary. I'm going to come out with a book.
Come out with it, sir.
And map out all this stuff. Because you know what, if we don't know our past, it's hard for us to know our future.
Exactly. And you know what? That is the perfect
Place to end.
perfect place to end. I need to say something. This is all about two things: education and moving forward.
Yeah.
Right? So I personally, and I know the whole panel, I'm so like happy and excited
I'm pumped,
that
bro.
Bishop that you came
Elected.
and elected.
Very happy to be here.
And Bishop, Pastor Michael White, that you came to give us perspective, because we can sit here talking. I can only talk from my perspective. I do not shepherd 250, 500, 1,000. I don't. So it's always going to be speculation on my part. Do you know what I mean? I know what I do, but I don't know what you do. So to hear you say, and it's funny that you were the person that said, well, it's not my job, but you're actually the person that's doing the job we're asking. That was a little bit mad. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, we're going to have to do another one of these and come with some slightly different questions, because there's so much to get, not past, but so much to discuss. And it's all valuable. Education is a massive part of this, because things like what JC said, where like we can't do what we don't know. What Matty was saying, we can't do what we don't know. And this has been so positive. So people, please let us know in the comments what you think. Log on to the Top Entertainment YouTube to see all past episodes and future episodes, and rock with us, because as you can see, we try and contain it in an hour and it's just not happening. So there's going to be more. There's lots of initiatives coming out of this, by the way. This isn't us just talking for the sake of talking. So we're all here and we are working together. We talk all the time about ways to move forward and things that we can do with our little platforms and our little equipments and stuff, and make stuff happen. So I love that, man. We go again.
Can I say something, Io? I'm sorry, I know we're finished, but can I just let everyone know that since the George Floyd situation, there's now a lot of openings that's going to happen in 2021. And I want us to be ready. The government promised a certain amount of money that should go to our community, the BBC, etc. And I think that we need to hold people to an account. We talked about industry. I told you, I bought a television station. There's strong racism out there. There's people who don't want us black people to move forward. And I've just now, again, Ruach has launched a DAB radio station this week. So again, we're trying our best to set up platforms. But I want us to understand that we need to be united. We need to stop mouthing each other. We need to also remember the bridge that that helped us to cross over. Because sometimes a lot of people don't testify and don't talk about where they came from and how they got where they are. And almost like sometimes without them knowing, demonize each other. But there's a lot of opportunities coming in 2021. Please, let's be ready for it. And let's hold the government to account. They have set aside money for our community. And if we don't have our act together, we will not be able. And I'm sitting on these different platforms. So when it comes to the time, I hope that you guys are ready. And I say, hey, there's money coming from this area.
I'm coming to you, Bishop.
Run and get it.
I'll DM you. I'll send you a DM, Bishop.
Wicked. We out.
Bless you.